My last guest for today is Matthew Holliday. Now, he heads the European Division of the International Commission for Missing Persons. He has extensive knowledge on the situation of missing persons in Albania and what needs to be done to get justice for them. Matthew, you authored a report a few years ago. We discussed it at the time. What has changed since then? Because back then there was very little progress in finding any of these people. In fact, people were being blocked in the courts. Has there been any progress since then?
There has been some small progress in recent years since we issued the report. Over the last 12 months, we've been working through a program of work for the coming 2 years that we would like to see kind of leverage, let's say, greater action by the government and by the state of Albania to address the issue of persons missing from the communist era.
Now, I've heard people deny that this number is exact and that there are not that many missing people. Why would people deny this? Why would they not believe it? Because I assume in your report you have facts to back this up. Like you have facts and data and information for the number of people that are missing.
There are locations that highly likely contain human remains of victims of the communist period. However, we've noted, and I think we noted even in our report of a couple of years ago, even perhaps more, that there was, there could be greater activity on the part of the state prosecutor's office, because obviously this is a rule of law process. We don't want to see NGOs or private citizens or families of the missing going to suspected grave sites and exhuming them, and one might understand why. For one reason, it's a very human reason. But on the other hand, they should be treated as potential crime scenes and so excavated under court order. And when you have illegal death, there are various obligations that kick in on the part of the state and the prosecutor and law enforcement, which entail an investigation. And to be effective, an investigation may require exhumation of graves to determine cause and manner of death to the victim. So, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of good reasons as to why, investigations should take place, but we still note a lack of action on the part of the state prosecutor's office to issue these orders for exhumation.
Could the number be even higher?
The figure that we gave in our report of approximately 6,000, although we estimate that the figure could be higher, is based on our discussions and the work conducted by the Institute for the Integration of the Politically Persecuted. They have records of 5,501 executed persons under the communist regime following court proceedings. And the Institute has verified every one of these cases. They've documented it. And in addition, there are also applications from the families of that same number of victims that have applied for reparations under the reparations scheme in Albania. So I think this is fairly solid evidence to indicate, at least 5,501 that were executed under court order. In addition, the Institute for the Politically Persecuted Persons of Albania has 987 records of political prisoners who died of various causes in the detention centers and camps. So already this puts it as a figure above 6,000.
And why do you think there's little interest in finding these people?
I don't think these issues can be consigned to history for sure. I mean, if we think about the families, they have an enduring and lasting, right to know, but also right to justice as well. Obviously, and if they have rights, then there are obligations upon the state. So it's not really a question of do we want to do this or do we not want to do this as the state. We have human rights obligations as Albania to investigate these cases. And as I mentioned before, an investigation to be effective would require exhumation, identification efforts and determining cause and manner of death. Even if criminal proceedings are not pursued against possible perpetrators, it would be important to conduct these investigations just for the sake of the families to actually receive the mortal remains of their missing relatives and to give them a dignified burial. The question of political will, it's a good one. I mean, Albania has myriad priorities amongst everything else. And yes, the issue of missing persons could be higher on the political agenda for sure.
And what happens now? I mean, it's over 30 years. The people who knew these people are dying, sadly. There's little political will. Is this just a situation where they're ultimately going to be forgotten?
ICMP is working with its partner, the authority, on opening the communist-era state security files on a number of key priorities. One, and this goes back to the question you asked me about the numbers, is actually establishing a central register of persons missing from the communist era. So ICMP is supporting the authority to establish a dedicated database that we hope will include all records of missing persons. And this will provide an irrefutable record, if you like, of those that went missing during the communist era or were executed and whose remains are unknown to their surviving relatives, for the public, but also as a tool that can later be used for a more serious effort or investigation to actually locate, exhume, and identify. So that's one key thing. We're also in process, together with the EU and the authority, of organizing a series of community dialogue meetings to better understand the needs and wishes of the different communities, the victims groups, the survivors, the families of the missing, but also engaging with, local government itself, and the various different institutions that should be engaged in a process to reach some conclusions about how to move this forward. And besides that, we also have a number of pieces of technical work that ICMP will be conducting next year. These include the probing of possible sites of burial of persons executed during the communist regime. This very much is a partnership activity with the authority on opening the state security files. The authority is obliged to obtain the necessary permissions and permits to do the actual probing of possible sites. ICMP will deploy its technical experts and necessary equipment, expertise, etc., to determine the likelihood of the presence of human remains at these locations, and will issue reports to the authority, which it can then use for its advocacy efforts towards the state prosecutor's office to actually issue orders for exhumation if indeed there's a high likelihood that these sites will contain human remains. And besides that, we're also providing small grants to civil society organizations and family associations for their lobbying work as well, to ensure that this issue does, greater awareness is raised around this issue, which, as I said before, should be higher on the political agenda for Albania.